Hi, it's Dwyer, dwyercrime.blog. Today is January the 20th, 2025. Let's talk about one of the more infamous crimes in Orange County history. Right, I used to live in Newport Beach for a few years in the 1990s, and I remember when this crime was major news. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, a patent holder living in a gated community. He was worth more than $50 million, which was big money back then. Bill Mclaughlin, right? He had just returned from Las Vegas. He's in his gated community in Balboa. He's wearing a bathrobe. Someone then walks into his home. They have a key. And of course, they shoot him 6 times, leaving the shells to a Beretta 92F. And of course, the hit person leaves, leaving no DNA. Just the shells. Just a key that shows that the killer had a key to the house. So, Bill's son, Kevin, here's the shots. They're interspersed in shots of 2, right? It's bang, bang, pause. Bang, bang, pause, bang, bang. Now, Kevin's interesting because Kevin, of course, was scheduled that night to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. He missed the meeting. So he's home. He also has brain injury from a prior incident. So he's not completely understandable at first. He comes downstairs, he sees his dad shot to death. He calls the police. There are recordings of that telephone call, right? He's slurring his words. The cops get there. The cops see that Bill's been shot by a gun. The cops ask Kevin, "Are there guns in the house?" Kevin admits that his father has a gun safe. Right, folks, the facts of this case really lend themselves to a TV series. Right, Kevin admits that there's a gun safe. The cops, of course, are curious of everyone. They don't know the people involved. They don't want to give anyone the benefit of the doubt. So they do a gun residue test on Kevin's hands. The cops determine, based on the gun residue test, that Kevin has not recently fired a firearm. Right now, you and I are true crime veterans. We understand that there may have been gloves involved. But the cops that night decide that Kevin isn't the assailant. So, let's talk about how this unfolds. Let's pause it right here. Let's talk about the list of possible assailants. Bill is divorced. Right? Just understand, he's paying his ex-wife $300,000 a year. And of course, she got a property in Hawaii out of the divorce. But the cops rule her out. There's no evidence that she's in Newport Beach when this murder takes place. Also, when you have a $300,000 a year cash flow from a guy who's only 55 years old, you're looking at $300,000 a year for what? The next 20 years at least? What incentive would Bill's ex-wife have to kill him? Also, they have kids together. They have 3 kids together. right? Kevin and two other kids. One, Jenny, who lives in San Diego. The other, Kim, is teaching in Tokyo. Right, so the police look at the ex-wife. They believe that the ex-wife couldn't have done this. Right, Bill also has a disgruntled former business partner who claims that Bill shouldn't be listed as the sole holder of the patent that they developed to separate blood from plasma. Right, Bill and this disgruntled business partner were involved in really arduous litigation that ended up with Bill winning the litigation and with this partner owing Bill millions of dollars, according to reports. The police look into him. They reach the conclusion that he has an airtight alibi. Also, there's the issue of whether the business partner would have the keys to Bill's house. So, of course, they then learn about Bill's fiancée, a much younger woman with two kids from a prior relationship. Her name is Nanette Johnston. They run into her that night. She shows up at the house, finds out that Bill's been murdered. They escort her to another of Bill's properties where, she can safely spend the night, supposedly. They start doing surveillance of her. They see her making out about a week later with a former NFL linebacker named Eric Naposki. Now, Naposki is actually around the Newport Beach area. He's operating as club security for a club near Bill's house. So the police talk to Nanette, and they say, hey, we thought you were engaged to Bill Mclaughlin. What are you doing making out with this other guy? And according to reports, Nanette tells the police that the other guy is her friend with benefits. Welcome to a modern California relationship. She goes further and says that her fiancé, Bill, who's older, knows that she has a friend with benefits. So the cops start looking at the friend with benefits, Eric Naposki. Let's talk about the evidence here. Let me also pivot right here. Naposki fascinates me. He's one of the better spoken criminal defendants you're going to come across. Right? He claims he didn't do it. He's hinted in interviews that he might have been set up. Right? He gets involved in the world of Nanette and her fiance Bill. And they may have tried to, at least Nanette, pin it on him. So let's talk about the evidence against him. Understand, both Nanette and Eric Naposki have been in prison, convicted of murder. The cases have had appeals. Right? Both Nanette and Eric Naposki, who stopped going out together a long time ago, have given interviews to the media. Right? Both claim they're innocent. Well, let's talk about the key evidence. Because understand, the killer that night uses a key to get into the house. Understand, a home in a gated community, you have to know your way into the community. You have to have a way to get into the home. Understand too, because Bill had a gun safe, an intruder has to seriously consider the idea that if they're noisy breaking into the home, they might find that they're invading the home of someone who's armed. Well, let me just say, the former owner of Tustin Hardware Dave Vandermeer testified that not too long before the killing of Bill, Eric Naposki was in his store and cut 2 basic keys. In other words, Eric is getting keys made shortly before this murder. Let's think this through. A guy shows up with the key that he wants duplicated in a hardware store. Where did he get the key that he wants duplicated? If you believe law enforcement, he got the key from Bill's fiancée, Nanette. Right? That's what they're deducing. That Eric Naposki is in Tustin Hardware getting copies of Bill's keys that came from an insider in Bill's life, his friend with benefits, Nanette. So, of course, police look a little deeper, and they find out that these friends with benefits, right, that's what Nanette called Eric. These friends with benefits were actually out looking at homes together when neither of them had any money. So this is California. Real estate is hopelessly overpriced. They were in Irvine, California, and they were looking at homes that cost $1 million or more. This is years ago, decades ago. One wonders how they could be shopping for homes when they didn't have any money. Right? The idea is that Nanette may have thought she was going to come into money because she was named in Bill's will. She was also named on an insurance policy that Bill had. Right? According to some reports, she was to get more than $1 million from Bill's estate off the will alone. Then she was supposed to get additional money, up to $1 million off the life insurance. So just to understand, these friends with benefits were actually out looking at homes. Right? Apparently, these were the friends with benefits who were going to actually share a house together. Well, it gets more interesting than that, because there are recordings of Nanette Johnston, and Nanette supporters need to address this evidence. There are recordings of her talking with an investment group about investing as much as $200,000 in an Irvine software company. Right? Again, this is before Bill's killed. Nanette's talking about investing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where's the money coming from? Well, of course, as the police look at Bill's finances, they find out that Nanette, the fiancé, has been embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from Bill. Right? So the question arises, would Bill, a multimillionaire who's flying to places like Vegas, right, would Bill keep her as a fiancé if he found out that before they got married, she was actually defrauding him? Right? Hold that question in your head. Also, ask yourself, too, if Bill found out that Nanette was defrauding him, how would she avoid jail time? If she has been defrauding Bill, might she be afraid that Bill is going to drop dime on her, get her arrested, actually have the checks on which she put fake signatures entered into evidence? right? She's a single mom, right? Was she concerned about her kids, her life, the fact that she's looking at criminal exposure, right? As well as being cut off from Bill, period. Wedding canceled, right? Will changed, life insurance policy changed. Is it possible that one solution to Nanette's problems would be to get Bill knocked off? Possibly with the help of her friend with benefits, the guy who she's shopping for houses with, Eric Naposki. So then we get the coup de grace, the gun evidence. Now, there are certain cases where you hear the evidence and you think to yourself, you know what, either this defendant is the unluckiest man in the world, or this defendant did the crime. Now, Bill is shot and killed with a Beretta 92F 9mm. Now, you understand there are a lot of different gun models, right? If I say, hey, I own a gun, if it wasn't the gun used in the crime, then that information's really irrelevant. Eric Naposki could have had any gun in the universe, right? He could have openly said to the police, I have a rifle, right? No one would have cared, apart from whatever the gun registration laws are, right? No one would have cared because a rifle wasn't used in this murder. But incredibly, in the universe of guns, Eric Naposki admitted to the cops that there was a time when he had a Beretta 92F 9mm, the same gun used in this murder. Now, let me just say, if Naposki is unlucky, right, if you're enjoying your Beretta 92F and then suddenly some guy who happens to be the fiance of the woman you're sleeping with, right, your friend with benefits, is murdered by a Beretta 92F. It seems to me if you still have your Beretta 92F and it hasn't left you, in other words, you have it in a gun safe, it's still there, it hasn't been involved in any murder, it seems to me you would want to give that gun to the police, wouldn't you? You would want to say, you know, this sounds crazy, but I have a Beretta 92F. Let me give it to you guys. I haven't fired the gun recently. Right? This isn't the gun. You know, you'd be grateful that the casings were at the murder scene because the casings would show that they did not come from your gun. Well, guess what happens? Naposki, after initially hemming and hawing with the police, admits to having had a Beretta 92F. And of course, he claims that he gave it to a friend who did work for him as payment for the work he did. Right? The friend says, he never gave me a Beretta 92F. Understand, Naposki's gun, the same model as the gun used to kill Bill Mclaughlin, can't produce his gun. It's missing. Now, either that's one of those completely freaky coincidences, or it hints at guilt. Well, let's look at the gun a little bit more closely, right? Because Eric Naposki is supposed to be, you know, a guy who isn't supposed to be a gun expert, is he? Right? This killer's supposed to be surgical. Well, just understand, there's a witness, Leonard Chomsky, who claims that he was at a gun range with not just Eric Naposki, but with Eric's friend with benefits, Bill's fiancée, Nanette Johnston. Right? Just understand that they visited a gun range, and according to Leonard, Nanette was very adept with a firearm. Now, Nanette has a receipt from the shopping she did that night that suggests that she couldn't have been buying goods at the store while also murdering Bill at Bill's home. She couldn't be in two places at one time. But just to understand, both Eric and Nanette looked adept to Leonard Chomsky when they were all at the gun range together. So, let's remember the sounds that Kevin heard the night that his father died. Right? Kevin didn't just hear 6 shots. He heard 6 shots in sets of 2. Right? It's bang, bang. Pause. Bang, bang. Pause. Bang, bang. Pause. Also, his father is hit right under the nipple. That's the kind of place that hitmen hit you, because you have little chance of survival. Those are lethal shots. Well, let me just point out, and again, either Naposki is the unluckiest man in the United States, or he's the killer. We have evidence that a Joseph Adam Strotman, an Orange County-based private investigator, as well as a firearms and combat expert, provided Naposki just 3 to 4 months before Bill's murder with what's called double tap method training. Right? The gun expert explained that a common feature of the double tap technique is to fire your shots to the lower chest area, right around where Bill was hit, and to do so in sets of 2. Right? As this witness, Joseph Adam Strotman, explained, a stomach shot is a very lethal shot. Right? So just to understand, not only does Naposki, by chance, have the exact model of gun used in Bill's murder, but by chance, this gun owner received double tap method training in the months before Bill's murder. Right, folks? Ask yourself, how many Beretta owners have received double tap method training? Right, first off, how many gun owners around Bill's house own this Beretta type of weapon? Then ask yourself, of the few who own this Beretta type of weapon, a 9F, how many of them received double tap method training? Well, just to understand, Eric Naposki did. Eric Naposki not only owned the type of murder weapon used that's now missing, but he also received double tap method training. So I'm inviting Eric Naposki, if he wants to do a video. I'm not the type to interview those accused of violent crimes. I wouldn't want to impact someone's appeals, but I would allow Eric Naposki to post an unedited video. I would literally just post it as it's presented to me. here on YouTube. Right now, don't get me wrong. While it would be unedited, I would do a follow-up video where I would comment on what's being presented. Only one relative of one person one criminally accused who I've talked about here online has sent me such a video. And I believe the criminally accused here who got convicted actually was able to get a new trial, not necessarily because of my work, but just because of the shaky facts of the case. I questioned whether that defendant was actually guilty. Another family member in a similar situation has corresponded with me, sent me court documents in a case where her criminally accused relative was able to get further court proceedings, and where the attorneys were sanctioned by attorney disciplinary boards for misconduct in their cases. So it has happened where people watching my videos have taken me up on my offer. Here, because Naposki is interesting, because he has admitted to certain facts, such as owning the same type of weapon, right? It took a while, but eventually the cops got him to admit to that. Right? And because he's verbal and well presented, I'd love to, and I invite him to, send me a video that I can share with subscribers here. From this seat, because Naposki, and I know he disputes this, had the means to get to Bill's house, right, is in the area. I know he disputes this. Because Naposki had the same type of weapon, because Naposki had a financial motive, right? If Bill got killed, Nanette would cash twice, right? The life insurance policy and the will. They would get into enough money where they could buy the house in Irvine. Clearly, Nanette thought she was coming into money. Right? The friends with benefits seem to me to be more than just friends with benefits. Right? I think Naposki and Nanette Johnston did the crime. I think the police caught the right people. There are just too many coincidences here. Let me say this too. Let's say I'm the fiance of a woman who gets shot in the chest 6 times on a given night, right? And the cops have really no evidence. In other words, you hear that your beloved got brutally assassinated. There are no footprints. There's no DNA anywhere, right, folks? If I'm shaken and the cops say to me, hey, you can stay in his other home, I'm thinking, what? Why would I stay in the other home of someone who was just assassinated? How do I know that this isn't some cartel trying to wipe out the family? Nanette went to that other home. The night Bill gets murdered, Nanette spends the night in another property owned by Bill. Right, folks? To me, the behavior is inconsistent with someone with no clue on what happened. Also, let's be real too. Even if you have a friend with benefits that Bill knows about, you're really going to be caught smooching with that person within days of Bill's murder? That strikes me as strange. Right? I also don't buy the Eric did it on his own bit. Right? If Eric is a friend with benefits, let's take Nanette at her word. He's just a friend with benefits. What leads him to believe that if he kills my fiance, then I'm going to stay with him? That I'm not going to think, man, I was just kicking it with dude, and now he's killing people because he thinks he loves me? Right, that might not be the man of Nanette's dreams unless they've talked about it, unless Nanette's helping him get the key to Bill's place. Get Bill's flight information to him so he knows when Bill's going to return from Las Vegas. Tell Eric the schedule of Sons Kevin's Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Understand, Kevin was not supposed to be at home at that time. He was supposed to be at an AA meeting. So from this seat, this looks like an inside job involving Bill's fiancée and her friend with benefits, both of whom have been convicted for this murder. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I hope you leave them in the comment section of this YouTube video. Let's just say for me, and I take the proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard extremely, I view it as an extremely important safeguard in our democracy, right? But I have to tell you, if I'm in a jury box and I'm hearing that Eric Naposki had keys made in the weeks before the murder, that Eric Naposki just happened to be a gun owner, just happened to have the exact same type of murder weapon, just happens to have lost it so his gun can't be tested, just happens to have been trained in the double tap method training, which seems to be the technique used to kill Bill. At a certain point, I'm going to say these are too many coincidences. Unless Naposki can prove to me that he was in a different state, he looks like the killer. Then, of course, you throw in the fact that he's out shopping for homes and he has very little money to buy a home. And, of course, this happens to take place shortly before Bill is killed. And I'm going to reach the conclusion that the prosecution has found the right guy. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.